Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. It's our first meeting of 2017. Let's make it a good meeting. Welcome, and today we have several items that I know that you're here for. If you are new to the chambers, when we call the item that you will be speaking on, I have speaker cards that are at the end behind, and if you could just fill those out, we'll be calling you forward. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will indicate when your time is up. Yellow indicates that you have 30 seconds left. And before we get into all those details, I would like to just call the meeting to order, which I've done, and ask our clerk to do our roll call.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rob Rennie.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Mariko Sayak.
Here, thank you. So before we begin, we always introduce a young member of our community to come forward and help us do the Pledge of Allegiance. And so if I could call Eli Youssef to come forward. Okay, so Eli is an 8th grader at Hillbrook. Come on over. And he enjoys creative writing and has strong marks in math and science. But what I found interesting, I always learn something about these kids. Outside of school, he's a dedicated and avid tricker. I had never heard of this before. And so he explained that it's a sport which combines freestyle gymnastics and tumbling with martial arts and sometimes breakdancing. So immediately I ask, have you gotten hurt? But I think given that he's here and he's going to conduct Pledge of Allegiance, he should be fine. So please welcome Eli.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is for you. So if you can all join me in thanking him for joining us today. Okay. So another fun thing that we do, the second meeting of the month, is we have a program which Councilman Leonardis started a couple of years ago, which is remind me the name of the program. Small Business, Big Applause. So as many of you have probably heard, Los Gatos Company is going to close its doors at the end of the month. And so we have asked the owners to come forward to basically be recognized for the wonderful contribution they've been doing to our town for the past 25 years. So if I can just ask Marnie and Andy Bevetto to come forward. So we have a commendation here that all council members have signed, and let me just read some pertinent information. Los Gatos Company, located at North Santa Cruz Avenue, defines contemporary artistic style. It has become widely known among Northern Californians for its wonderful assortment of artwork and artistic and handcrafted gifts. Now, therefore, we, the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos, do hereby render with special appreciation and commendation to the Los Gatos Company and to wish them well as they are set to retire shortly after having served the Los Gatos community for 25 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
would you like to say some words?
Well, it's been a great 25 years. We've enjoyed every moment of being part of this fabulous community. And we are so, so lucky to have one of the most amazing, beautiful, wonderful downtowns in the United States. We really, it's a gem. And we need to protect it. We need to nurture it. We need to support it, every one of us. So, Andy.
Well, I totally agree with Marnie. It has been a wonderful experience living in Los Gatos, and hard to believe 25 years have gone by. I can still remember people coming in the store and saying, "How long have you been open?" I said, "Oh, this is our first week," and now this is our 25th year, so it's a little bit scary to where all that time went. But I want to thank all of you and thank the town for the support they've given us over the years.
So thank you again. 25 years goes by quickly, but we will definitely miss both of you. So thank you. Okay. At this time, our last time we met was December 20th. I'd like each council member just to update the rest of the council on what, if any, they have done on behalf of the town since December 20. Council member Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Since our last regular meeting, I attended a West Valley Sanitation District Board of Directors meeting. It was a very brief general business meeting, nothing significant to report, as well as a meeting for the San Jose Treatment Plant Advisory Committee, otherwise known as TPAC, which was also a very brief meeting. And that's all I have to report this time.
Thank you. Council member Jensen?
I have nothing to report.
Okay, since our last regularly scheduled meeting on January 10, we had a commissioner orientation where we welcomed our new commissioners to their appointed boards and commissions and committees. I spoke at the Lions Club meeting to just let them know what are the latest with the town, and shared with them that on January 31st, we will be having a prioritization session meeting here in Chambers, and ask all of you for your participation. On January 11, a new business has just opened in town called Moonstone Metaphysical, and we had the ribbon cutting. And Cities Association meeting on January 12th, I was there in addition to Council Member Rennie. And Council Member Rennie, would you like to elaborate on what happened that day? Your selection.
Okay, I will. With your indulgence, I'd like to spend a few extra minutes on VTA since we do have traffic on our agenda tonight and I'm involved in several places. So for the benefit of the audience, the difference between VTA and Caltrans is a state organization that's jurisdiction is our state highways, so like 17 and Route 9 are their jurisdiction. VTA runs our bus systems, our light rail, and maybe it's going to be BART when it gets into our county, and they're a county-wide organization, and they're also in charge of building projects, helping build the projects for the highways and for light rail and so forth. VTA has a board of directors that their CEO reports to, and that set the policy and approve the projects and so forth. And we, the West Valley cities, which include Saratoga, Montesrino, Los Gatos, Cupertino, and Campbell, get to appoint one person to that board. So the West Valley mayors has appointed Savita, I'm not even going to try her last name, to be the primary board member from the West Valley cities, and I was appointed to be the alternate. So on January 5th, I was sworn in as the alternate to that board. Savita also sits on some subcommittees of that, for example, the Congestion Management Committee, so I will get to fill in for her when she can't make certain meetings, so I'm scheduled already to be filling in for her at a Congestion Management meeting. VTA has a lot of different policy types of advisory boards, of which one is called the Policy Advisory Committee. Councilmember Jensen and I have been serving on that for 2 years as alternate and primary. I attended that meeting on January 12th. They also have an 85 quarter policy advisory board, of which Councilmember Jensen and I are the primary and alternate since the inception of that board. That one hasn't met yet since our last council meeting. I also wanted to mention Los Gatos is very involved in VTA. In addition to those, our Parks and Public Works director has been, and I think still is, the chair of the TAC, which is the Technical Advisory Committee. And in addition, we in Los Gatos have our own Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for Los Gatos, and we get to appoint somebody to the VTA Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And our appointment is Peter Hertan, and he is currently the chair of that committee. So Los Gatos is getting their voice well heard, hopefully, at VTA. So I just wanted to kind of give you all sort of the big picture on many of the committees of which we in Los Gatos are influencing VTA. At the VTA, I'll just say that I think we've mentioned a little bit before, the thing that's very significant going on at VTA is they're working on their next generation service plan, where they're moving their resources from very low ridership areas to the higher density ridership and job areas, and they're adding they're adding buses and creating this rapid grid of 15-minute bus and light rail lines that will have quick transfers, so that the idea is to increase ridership where people are already riding and it's easy to go. But the disadvantage to that is they're pulling resources out of places like the West Valley where people don't ride the bus. They're talking about their current plan, I believe, still has a bus coming down Winchester and going across 9 and back up Los Gatos Boulevard, but it won't come all the way into downtown like it used to. It won't go past the high school. It doesn't go by our El Camino hospital. They cut these routes out because basically it's a zero-sum money and cost for them, so they've got to cut somewhere, and they're cutting the routes where not many people ride. I wanted to mention they're in what's called their phase 2 of public outreach for that. The VTA board that I attended that meeting when I was sworn in approved them to go ahead and bring their plan to the public for the second time. They developed the plan based on public input. And there will be one in Campbell next Monday at 6 o'clock at the Campbell Library if anybody wants to attend and give their feedback on that. So moving on from VTA, as the mayor mentioned, the Cities Association, the Santa Clara Cities Association also gets to give appointments to county boards and committees and commissions. And at that meeting, I've been serving from them as the alternate to the county's Emergency Operating Area Council. At the Cities Association Selection Committee, I was moved up to be the primary on the Emergency Operating Area Council. And I also have been serving as an alternate to a commission called LAFCO, which is its primary mission is to oversee the efficient delivery of services and control the annexation of land into towns and preserve ag and open space and contain sprawl. I've been moved up to the primary commission member for that also. On January 11th, I also serve on the Clean Energy Board. Hopefully you've heard about the new clean energy power company we're starting. I'm the vice chair for that board. We had a meeting on January 11th. Also on the list of things I did, I presented as part of the Clean Energy Board. I've been going around giving presentations in Los Gatos to let people know what it is and that it's coming. So I presented on December 27th at the afternoon Rotary about that. And then also this Sunday on the 15th, not about that, but just generally about the town, I presented to the Cub Scouts Den 3-Pack 556, just about the town in general. So that's what I've been up to.
Thank you. Councilwoman Spector?
Thank you. On a more general plane, over the past month, I've had many informal meetings with members of our residential and business community in Los Gatos.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Schultz, do you have a closed session report that you can provide?
Yes, good evening. Prior to the regular session, council met in closed session to discuss labor negotiations with our POA. No action was taken that requires reporting under the Brown Act.
Thank you. And Ms. Pravetti, Managers Matters?
Thank you. With respect to Vice Mayor Rennie's comments regarding the bus service, we are also conducting a community meeting for Los Gatos residents together with our Transportation and Parking Commission. This will be on the 9th of February at 6 p.m. in these chambers. All members of our public are welcome, and that input would be provided to VTA and to our council. I've also been asked to share with the council and our public the activity that we all experienced last Wednesday, January 11th, which is when Highway 17 experienced the mudslide, which then created severe traffic in our community. And we recognize that it was very disruptive to our town residents and to our businesses. In response to this condition, additional police resources were called into service. We typically have a patrol of 4 officers. We had 8 additional officers on duty that evening, in addition to 1 parking control officer and 3 of our disaster aid and response team members. So we had additional strong resources. Again, we're really trying to provide public safety for all 13 square miles of Los Gatos, plus our neighboring community of Montecito. It was a very busy night, given the traffic and the rain, et cetera. We had 73 calls for service, which officers needed to respond to. And in addition, our call center, our dispatch center, handled an additional 248 calls in terms of answering the public's questions, providing additional information, or assisting in other ways. And I just want to say on behalf of the town that we really appreciate our residents' patience in circumstances like this. This was a natural occurrence of a mudslide that was not really predicted, and we know how disruptive it was. So wanted to give some facts on what actually happened on that night. And then in relation, we really encourage all town residents and other members of our community to sign up on our social media accounts. We have a Notify Me provision on the town's website, and the public can sign up for our council policy committee, our council finance committee, planning commission, T&P, any of our number of commissions, and that way you can stay connected, know when agendas are posted and materials are available. In addition, we are live on Facebook, Instagram, and Nextdoor, and Twitter, and so those are additional opportunities. I think most of our names are Town of Los Gatos, so we're easy to find. And what we will be doing in response to things like storms is when we do post a message on Nextdoor, we will follow it up with a similar message on Twitter or Facebook, recognizing that some people prefer one platform compared to other platforms. So we really encourage the public to sign up. And then finally, just wanted to promote our library programs. Many of you are familiar with our infant reading programs and programs for preschoolers and young adults and teens. We are active with our Be a Book family, and we've got new programming happening there. In addition, we're starting to offer technology classes for adults who wish to understand how do you use your iPhone, how can you connect better to laptops, et cetera. So we're really broadening our programs, and we encourage the public to visit our website for more details. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we are going to be moving towards our consent item. And so what it is, there are 9 items that are on consent. These are usually what we deem to be non-controversial, and so they are acted upon in one motion unless it is pulled by someone from either council or in the public. At this time, I have no cards from the public, and I look to the council, and it appears no one would like to pull anything. Would anyone from the public like to pull any item from agenda 1 through 9? Seeing none, I look to the council for a motion. Councilwoman Jensen?
Move approval of the consent calendar consisting of items 1 through 9.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. So now we move to verbal communications. This is the portion of the meeting where you may speak for 3 minutes on anything that is not on the agenda. I have 2 cards at the moment. So the first one, Angelia Dorner.
Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove. And I just wanted to remind you that at the last meeting, I discussed the need for a signal at Masal and Highway 9, especially as it relates to the pending project referred to as the McCarthy Ranch project, which will be located between the diner and the postal annex, through the postal annex. It will represent 15,500 square feet of office bank, potentially including a bank, 6,000 square feet of retail restaurant, underground parking. It was scheduled for the Planning Commission on January 25th, but has been postponed, I believe, till March. Anyway, the 3 red X's are the primary significant intersections that will be impacted by this construction and this project, and that is Masal, Santa Cruz, and University. I want to bring your attention also to another much larger project referred to as 401-409 Alberta Way, which will, now these numbers that I have here are from the original proposal, which did get denied by the Planning Commission. However, they have come back with a new plan, but those new plans are not online yet. So the original plan was for close to 92,000 square feet of office space, huge underground parking, and it was scheduled to be in front of the Planning Commission, the new proposal on January 11th. But it got postponed as well until February. Both of these projects are going to involve a significant amount of infrastructure, and this is obviously too hard to read, but it's going to have significant impacts along Highway 9, basically from Alberta Way and beyond, all the way to and through Masal. Oh, and I'm giving you my scribbled up ones. I want to focus primarily on the one that will be impacting Santa Cruz and Highway 9. This is supposedly, the traffic impact analysis says that the town plans to make modifications to Santa Cruz and Highway 9 intersection. And unlike the level of service methodology adopted by the town council, the analyses are based on professional judgment. They are going to be squaring off 3 corners as indicated by the green, add 2 new lanes eastbound on Highway 9, including a second left-hand turn and a right-hand turn because the current free right will be taken away with those squared out edges. The west median is going to be significantly narrowed and shifted north. The east median has to be modified to align with the new lanes. There's a lot of different things, including a U-turn at Masal is being considered. So I'm just not sure how all of this work and what the status is, and what the status is of this work since Highway 9 is all under the jurisdiction of Caltrans. And I don't know if these have been through the Caltrans process. I know that we're not even allowed to change the signal lights. So I would hope that one of you will exercise some muscle, get involved with discussions with Caltrans, be on the front line, so that we can hopefully take control of that part of town and find out what's really going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Pravetti, I actually have, I know we can't discuss this since it's under verbal communications. Can you confirm where the 2 projects that were mentioned are in the planning process?
I'm going to ask Director Paulson to give us those
dates. And any
dates.
pertinent dates would be helpful.
So as Ms. Dorner mentioned, the project at the corner of Highway 9 and North Santa Cruz, they have requested a continuance. We do not have a firm date there. I believe they requested that to have additional outreach. Once the story polls went up, there was obviously some additional input, and so they wanted to handle that. The project down Alberto, they actually were continued at their last hearing to a date certain. However, they have not submitted revised plans for us to analyze yet, and so we will be hopefully receiving those very soon, and then a date will be set. But currently we are moving it out to February in hopes that they will have resubmitted revised plans and we'll have had time to review those.
And Mayor, if I may, just a reminder to our public that the pending projects page on the town's website is a great way to be able to view new plans, and to the extent we have new hearing dates, we'll post those proposed new dates on those same pages.
And I'm assuming at the hearing, the technical details that Ms. Dorner discussed with all the traffic would be analyzed at that time?
So all of that was analyzed in the environmental document, and then we will be there with our colleagues from Parks and Public Works to answer additional questions at those hearings.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Sack. So following up on the Caltrans idea, I'm assuming, normally when a project comes to the town, the Planning Commission, the council gets to give input on street reconfiguration and changes. I'm assuming that's still going to be the case even on Route 9, although it's not in our jurisdiction. Or is Caltrans going to go work something out with a builder without our input?
I would defer to Mr. Morley. I believe we have been working with both Caltrans, because Caltrans typically comments on projects, especially when they're in such close proximity or impact their facilities. And so we will continue to work with them, and then I would look to Mr. Morley if he has any additional comments.
And the question is specifically Planning Commission and Council, whether they'll get inputs.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part?
So the question is, normally Planning Commission or Council can give inputs on what happens on the street reconfigurations as a result of a project. It's a good point. This is Caltrans area, which we don't completely control. Are we still going to get to basically say yes or no to street reconfigurations at Planning Commission and Council?
So we provide our comments from the town's perspective into a document. We ask the developer to work with Caltrans, and Caltrans provides their comments as well. Through the process, our hope is that those comments align so that our coordination with Caltrans ahead of time assures that the comments are similar, or at least they complement each other. And then that would again move through the development process, and yes, the Planning Commission and the Council would have an opportunity to provide additional comment on those the project as it comes through.
But Council has final approval for the project. For example, if Council felt that improvements needed to be made, or the CEQA document says improvements need to be made, and Caltrans says, no, you can't do that to that road, you still have the ability to deny that project. Discretion still lies within the council to approve or disapprove. It is a state road, so we do need their approval to do it too. So we work hand in hand, and hopefully, as Director Morley said, when comments come in from both, they align together and everybody agrees on which improvements want to be done. And that's hopefully how it is done. But if there's a disagreement, you still have final authority on whether to approve or disapprove a project.
Councilwoman Spector, did you have a question?
My question was answered. Thank you.
Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Just a few years ago, I think we had what was called a Highway 9 Safety Committee, and there was a number of improvements done along Highway 9. Partners in the project were the City of Saratoga, the City of Montecito, and it was my belief that at the time all the improvements were done, and I think the committee is no longer in existence. But perhaps moving forward we can do a retake or a relook at that. I believe that they were working in conjunction with Caltrans, and there has been some increased interest since the traffic has increased, especially at the intersection of Missoula and Highway 9. Obviously, we are now hearing about the intersection of North Santa Cruz and Highway 9. We've heard, we redid the intersection of University and Highway 9, but there are people who sometimes have issues with that redo that we have done, and now we're looking at Alberta Way and Highway 9. So I was just wondering if perhaps moving forward we can look at, or maybe have staff get back to us about forming a new committee, such as the previous Highway 9 Safety Commission, and partner with Caltrans.
We can certainly explore that. Caltrans has a dedicated team to the South Bay called the I-Team that works out of the VTA offices in San Jose that is open for continued partnership. So we'll reach back out to them and make sure that we're engaged along the way.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Carrie DeChico.
Hi. Thank you, first of all, for providing this platform and hearing my concerns. My comments are regarding the McCarthy project at the intersection of Highway 9 and Santa Cruz Avenue. I have three main points I'd like for you to consider. First is the scope of the project. It's huge. There are no other buildings on the block that are 2 stories. It sticks out. The 2020 general plan mentions that new structures should be designed to harmonize and blend with the neighborhood. Serena Group's office across the street from the project is a great example of a remodel done right. This is a unique situation as it's the gateway to Los Gatos and it abuts the largest historical district in Los Gatos. The general plan is very clear on the gateway concept and impact to historical areas. Second, the proposed design will increase traffic to an unbearable amount on weekdays. The intersection of Masol Highway 9 is listed as LOS 4. It's the worst rating you can get. The traffic study says the rating is unaffected. It won't change. That's because, in their own words, the exact amount of delay is not known because delay exceeds calculation parameters. You can't get worse than an F. The project has 1 entry-exit point, which is a case of concern on its own, but the proposed solution of a U-turn at Masol will only serve to stack traffic in both directions and reroute traffic through our neighborhood, as people exiting the site will go right on Santa Cruz, right on Almendra or Bachman, then right again on Tate or Masol to go to Highway 9. And lastly, and this is personal to the homes on Almendra, the board of the project, this project strips us of privacy and it endangers our safety. Here is a view into my closet from the proposed development. No, I've got it, thank you. Here's a view into my shower. And here's a view into my office. I put a picture of a man on there because that's how I discovered the story poles. A man that was putting the story poles up was staring at me through my office window. An existing wall will be torn down, so access to our backyards will be easy. Our property values will plummet due to a developer trying to maximize every single centimeter. People like me who've lived in Los Gatos a long time, we know Silicon Valley is coming. And please know we're happy that the area is being redeveloped. We have a chance to do this right. I ask that when the time comes, you please keep in mind we're a town and not a city, and that this is what brings value to Los Gatos, not a 2-story office complex. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, and our next speaker, Maria Risto.
Hi, Maria Risto, 85 Broadway. I do sit on the Transportation and Parking Commission and work with Safe Routes to School, but I'm speaking as myself, just as a resident. As it's been stated sometimes, everybody complains about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. Sometimes it feels the same is true about traffic in Los Gatos. I'm not here to complain about either, but rather to briefly mention what has been done, is being done, and what can be done about one specific cause of traffic congestion, school traffic. What has been done? Safe Routes to School has transformed attitudes about active transport and made huge strides in the past few years in getting students to walk, bike, or scooter to and from school. The town has created a Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, put in green bike lanes, and completed a study of traffic around schools, which is now being implemented. The police department has worked with the schools and nearby neighborhoods to facilitate safer routes. What is being done? Safe Routes to School, Parks and Public Works, school administrators, youth groups, and the Transportation and Parking and Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Commissions are all working synergistically to get more students to school using active transport. The town is completing its first Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan. With the passage of Measure B, there's an opportunity for Los Gatos to pursue a privatized school busing program, similar to a program that has reduced school traffic by 25 to 30% in 8 years in Danville and San Ramon. We want this program. What can be done right now for free? Parents, keep those students walking and biking even when it gets chilly. We live in a very mild climate. Let's make walking and biking the first option for those in town. If your student must get to school in a car, 1, keep up the carpooling. Secondly, high schoolers can still be driven by their parents or other adults. Sophomores and juniors with provisional licenses cannot take friends in their cars, and single occupancy vehicles just create more traffic. Further, all those cars need scarce parking. You can drop your student at a park or local business several blocks from the school and have them walk the rest of the way. This reduces traffic near the schools. Residents and commuters, any chance you get, make your drive trips 15 to 30 minutes before or after the school crush. Everyone, especially you, will benefit. The next time you're in a car, remember, you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. Let's work together on solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Risto. Any questions? Okay, so that concludes verbal communications, and we will now begin our public hearing. Our first item on the agenda, item number 10, it's a public hearing to consider the abatement list and other hazardous vegetation, also known as weeds. So, Mr. Morley, would you like to provide our staff report on this?
Thank you. Just a quick staff report for you. We do 2 abatement programs every year. One is a weed abatement, and one is a brush abatement program, both of which we contract with the county to provide services. The weed abatement, which we're hearing tonight, is an opportunity for property owners to appeal their being on the list to abate weeds on their property. And so this is the hearing associated with that abatement. The representative from the county program is here if there's questions for him, and staff is available for questions, and that concludes the report.
Okay, great. Councilmember Johnson?
I think this is actually a question for Mr. Schultz. We got a desk item tonight from an interested party on a property in Los Gatos which he wishes to be included in the weed abatement. In part of the document, it indicates that he's been working with you and you have a program in place going forward to address that property. Is that correct or not?
I certainly have met with the person that you received the correspondence for, and we have discussed other avenues besides the weed abatement program or doing a weed abatement ordinance rewrite, which will be coming forward to you at the end of the month on whether that's a priority. So we've looked at not only the weed abatement, which of course the county doesn't agree that it falls within that definition, and so that prevents them from using it without an amendment. But yes, we have discussed both amending the weed ordinance or doing it under the neighborhood preservation ordinance, which is chapter 30th. So.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that there had been and anticipated there would be other discussions and alternatives.
Other questions? Okay. Well, I will open public testimony on this. I have one speaker, Phil, and you'll have to, is it Cohen? Kewen. Phil Kewen. Come on up.
I'll need your little clicker. Oh, here it is. Okay. Great. Well, good evening. That person you're referring to, that'd be me. So I'm Phil Keown. I live in Los Gatos on Wissahickon Avenue, and I'm here tonight to request the Town Council to include parcel 510-41-068 in the 2017 weed abatement program. I've already provided Council with a written request along with substantial backup material, which hopefully you've had a time to read. I'd like to take my precious 3 minutes to share with you a couple of additional thoughts. Let me go back. This map, which was prepared by CAL FIRE, shows a very high fire hazard severity zone for Los Gatos, which is the area in orange. A very high fire hazard severity zone is the highest fire severity zone mandated by CAL FIRE. A copy of this map can be found in the town's approved general plan. The circled area includes the parcel in question, many homes, including 80% of the Almond Grove district, and parts of historic downtown. The parcel we are discussing is located in the middle of the circled orange area. To reduce the risk of fire, the town established a hazardous vegetation abatement program, which has been administered through a contract with the Santa Clara County. The county has published minimum fire safety standards, which are shown on this slide. Please note the requirement of a 30-foot clearance around perimeter property lines for any parcel 1 to 5 acres in size, and the requirement to clear accumulated combustible debris such as wood and dead vegetation. The parcel in question is 1.6 acres. The County Weed Abatement Division staff's responsibilities are to inspect and order all necessary abatement work and on any parcel that doesn't meet these standards, and if the minimum fire safety standard has been met, but a fire hazard still exists, require additional work to reduce the fire hazard. Here are 4 parcels that I'd like to have for you to look at. 2 of them have been on the prior abatement list, but were dropped in 2017. 1 parcel was added this year. 1 has been on since 2010. Can you guess the 2 parcels that were dropped? Which one appears to you have the most vegetation and combustible debris? Any guesses? Well, if you picked these 2 parcels, you were correct. The one on the bottom is parcel 510-41-068, and I've already pointed out to the council with numerous pictures which documents the state of the parcel, so I don't want to do that again tonight. Based on what I see, I do not believe this parcel comes close to meeting the minimum fire standards. Here is my point. I don't think you can see that very clearly, but that's a picture of a wildfire. I can do everything in my power to keep my lot clear of debris, including maintaining a 30-foot defensible zone. But if the adjoining parcel lot doesn't comply with the minimum fire safety standard, the public will not be safeguarded. You have to vaccinate all the cows to protect the herd.
Mr. Kewen, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Hold on and see if there's any questions.
Yes.
Any questions?
Thank you.
If I could just understand, so you have submitted this parcel to the county for inclusion into the weed abatement program?
I'm requesting the town council, because it's your program, to instruct staff to include this parcel in the 2017 abatement program. It has been in the program every year since 2010, but was taken off this particular year, which seems very strange to me.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, you have one more, Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Sack. So, you know, as mentioned in the beginning, we have a weed abatement program and a brush abatement program. When I look at the property, it seems like it's maybe more appropriate for the brush abatement program. Why did you particularly choose the weed abatement one?
Because I have not seen a brush abatement program approved by this town council since 2009.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm closing public testimony unless someone else would like to speak. Okay, council members, any questions of staff? Council member Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For staff, I don't know who on staff, if we assume, and this is I'm going to make a factual assumption, if we assume that the property that the speaker is complaining about does indeed have brush/weeds that should be removed, what is the process and why would it have been removed? Why would it not be addressed only because it hasn't been on the list for 3 years? It seems like that would be a backdoor way of not having to protect your property.
So I think there's a couple questions in there. The 3-year element is if the property has not is inspected for 3 consecutive years and has no abatement requirement within those 3 years, then it falls off of the list, and that's built into the county's assessment program. So that's how they handle the program and allow a property to not undergo that assessment and that ongoing fee that's associated with the abatements. And then. I think there was a further question there or further information that you needed.
Council member?
Thank you. Let me follow up then. So are you saying that this property has been inspected for the last 3 years and has not been placed on the abatement list?
So it remains on the list, so it's been to the council every one of those last 3 years. However, there has been no abatement requirement associated with that property over the last 3 years.
Because
there has been no issue that's been identified. So the weed abatement inspector from the county goes out and visits the property on an annual basis and makes an assessment of whether there is a need to do abatement. In this particular case, because we had a higher level of interest, Parks and Public Works visited the property, as did the county and the town attorney, as well as the fire department, to make sure that everybody was confident in the decision that it did not need further abatement.
Thank you.
Councilmember Leonardis, and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Morley, how would you classify this property? Is this raw land? Is this a home site?
It's vacant land. It serves as a seasonal creek for water from the hillside. It's not developable from really any perspective. It's a steep incline on either side. Very similar to a lot of properties that we have on the hillside areas where we have vegetation on the property.
Do you have a follow-up to that?
Does it adjoin another parcel owned by the same owner? Is it privately owned, or?
It's privately owned. The owner does not reside in Los Gatos, or the mailing address for the owner is not in Los Gatos.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Sack. So when I look, and I think I also walked by the property a couple months ago, and looking at the pictures, I think I agree it's not a weed that grows up every year. What it is brush and a fallen tree or log or two that really need to be cleared once, and then it's probably okay for several years. So if this is, it seems to me that, yeah, something should be done to reduce the fire hazard, but what does that fall under if it doesn't fall under weed abatement? And I think I heard the town attorney maybe we're working on something if he wants to also answer.
That's correct. Based on the experts, the CAL FIRE and the county determining that it didn't fall within our weed abatement, I've looked at other ways of doing it under our public nuisance and under our, like I said, the Chapter 30, which is about neighborhood compatibility issues, and so we are looking at other ways that we could get the property cleaned up outside of our weed abatement.
If I could just follow on. So I guess the question in the back of my mind is, do we or does somebody agree that this is a fire hazard that should be helped even if it doesn't fall technically in weed abatement?
No, the fire department is comfortable with the property, as is the weed abatement program and town staff.
But we as the town could go beyond and do something about it. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Leonardis, and then Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Every year I get a postcard in the mail from the fire department that says, please clean up your brush and trim your trees 10 feet off the ground and whack all your weeds. Otherwise, we will come and do it for you, and then we will assess your property taxes. Is this property subject to that same kind of treatment?
So that's the other program, the brush abatement program. And there's a slight nuance, but the brush abatement program is managed by county fire and deals with ensuring that there's a clear area around your structure that's on your particular property. So they're looking for that 30 foot of clear, safe space. This particular property does not have a structure on it.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Question of staff, probably Mr. Schultz. It seems to me that if we pursue this issue on an ordinance, i.e. nuisance, we would be talking about some kind of litigation as opposed to the weed and brush abatement, where the property owner gets X amount of time, and if they don't do it, then the government does it and assesses the cost for it on their property tax bill. So am I correct that if we pursued something else, such as a nuisance ordinance, we would not have the effectiveness of the weed and brush abatement?
Certainly that's true, but a citizen also has the ability to dispute that our cleaning up the property fell within our weed abatement ordinance. Just because we automatically declare it necessary to be weed abated, we lien the property, they can still fight that lien if they believe we've done it not in violation of our own ordinances.
Yes.
Thank you again. So has the property owner of this specific, and I'm asking these questions because when I look at the pictures and I look at the slides, it looks very overgrown. So as the property owner of this specific property said, there's nothing wrong with my property, I don't want to do anything?
I have had no contact with the property owner. I'm not sure if other staff has or the county has.
nor have I, and we can have the county respond to that as well if you'd like. Yeah, introduce yourself.
And if you could just state your name for the record.
My name is Mo Cumry. I'm the weed abatement manager for the County of Santa Clara. We send out notices to the property owners, but we have not had a response from this particular property owner on this issue. I would like to say that a lot of the vegetation that you see that's overgrown is ivy, and in our brochure, one of the items we state is what are flame-resistant or fire-resistant plants, and ivy is one of those plants. So it wouldn't qualify for weed abatement because we're saying that's what you should put in to avoid us coming out to cut your property.
And so are you saying that, because I can't tell from these photographs, but are you saying that the ivy is the only vegetation shown on this property and on these pictures?
No, it's the predominant vegetation. There are trees, there is some brush in there, but most of the vegetation that you see growing up over the road fence, the barrier fence, and even up several of the trees is ivy. And a lot of the other plants are vegetation is also green vegetation that would appear to us to be more in line with flame resistant or fire resistant plants, and not as much an immediate fire hazard. What we're really looking for are those things that'll light quickly and begin the fire. It's our opinion that the first rung of the fire ladder has been removed just by nature because of the overgrown ivy that's choked out most everything else.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jensen?
This could be a question for you, sir, and also for the town. Does anyone know whether the owner of this property received notice of this hearing tonight?
They did not.
They did not. Okay. And from the town, they did not? Okay. Thank you.
And if I
well, then
may-
I wonder, so this is a question for Mr. Schultz and not for you, if I can follow up. If we are holding a public hearing for the purpose of receiving objections regarding weed abatement, this property was not concluded in our program and the person got no notice, wouldn't the council be violating that property owner's due process rights to include that property in a project without that person getting notice of the hearing tonight?
So if council decides, that's absolutely correct. If council decides it wants to add this parcel to the list, we would have to renotice and notice that property owner of the hearing so that he could come and object. He has not in the past, but that still doesn't mean he loses his due process rights.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, with no other questions, any comments, or would anyone like to venture into a motion? Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Based on all the information I've heard here this evening, I think it's best just to move forward with the staff recommendation, which is to order the abatement of the hazardous vegetation found in attachment 1 and not include this parcel at this time. I do appreciate the concerns brought forth by Mr. Cohen, but I think in fairness to the owner of the property who was not noticed, and based on what we heard from the county, the manager of the weed abatement program, I don't think there's any risk in moving forward with the staff recommendation this evening.
I have a motion. Would anyone like to venture a second? Councilwoman Jensen?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimous. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that was something different.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, Councilwoman Spector.
Yes, this would be of staff before I venture a motion, which would be staff's input on a motion to notice the property owners of the, whatever this is, this property, in order to have them come in and speak to the abatement, or whatever the word would be, since it isn't abatement. So what would we be doing if we invited them forward with a noticed hearing?
We'll have to look at the brush ordinance and determine how we want to bring that forward as a hearing. We certainly, I think what I would suggest is at the end of your priority goal setting, there's a few items on there that deal with this and a couple other issues dealing with public nuisances and how they're handled. So at that particular time, we could get further direction and bring you back exactly the process that we'd go through. You know, if that's acceptable. Otherwise, we could just, yes, we can give a notice in here, set a public hearing for this abatement issue on its own. I'd like to do further research to make certain I have experts lined up to determine that it's a public nuisance and that abatement's necessary for the brush.
All right, then what I would request, I don't want to move it forward when staff is not comfortable with the process. I wouldn't want to do that. But when it comes before us on January 31st, whatever it is, I would request that when you go through the priority items for weed and brush abatement, that you specifically call this one out.
I already have.
Thank you.
Okay, and one last question of staff. I should have asked it of Mr. Kewen prior to closing public hearing. Do you know if Mr. Kewen has even had a conversation with the neighbor, the owner of the parcel in question? And the reason I ask is just with all our land use decisions, we are asking our neighbors to work amongst themselves before bringing things to our attention and requiring a public hearing. So do you know if that has happened?
I believe that has occurred, but I couldn't tell you what the direction of the conversation was.
If that could also feed into whatever information is provided on the 31st, that would be helpful. Okay. Okay, so we now move to item number 11, which is cut-through traffic project 813-0229. Mr. Morley, I look to you for a staff report.
We'll point out that you have a desk item that you received late this afternoon on this particular item. As you're aware, we continued our beach cut-through traffic program through the end of the summer last year. We've highlighted the effectiveness of that closure in your staff report. Including how the closure impacts the traffic in the downtown area and the successes there, as well as the impacts or the trade-offs that we've talked about along the way. Those trade-offs happen north of Highway 9 and also to the businesses in the downtown area as traffic getting into the downtown is somewhat limited. The closure at Wood Road is seen as one element of multiple steps necessary to relieve the pressure of cut-through traffic throughout the town. We've implemented some of the other improvements, including signage on the pavement and road signs directing traffic to Highway 17. Some indications are that that signage has worked in some areas and in other areas not so much. But it's important that we continue to implement efforts, especially those that are low effort, low cost efforts, if we're building towards a future bigger project. I want to point out that the summer cut-through traffic that we experienced is completely different than the traffic we experienced over the last week. The last week's traffic was due to an emergency issue where even if we had a cut-through mitigation in place, such as a closure, it's not likely something that we could have implemented on a moment's notice. If you consider that by the time that we get notice and get equipment out there to make that closure happen, the impact, the traffic is extremely backed up, and putting a closure right in front of somebody who's been waiting in line would not go over well. And that doesn't even account for things like putting out message signs and that kind of work. So tonight we're looking for input from the council on continuing the closure into the next summer. We wanted to make sure that we continue that work in the off season now so that we don't lose the momentum that we have. If the closure is to continue into the future, we need to be working with Caltrans towards the permitting side of things. And so there's some work up front, and that's the main part of the proposal that we have in front of you tonight, is to begin that work. And that would scope a project and obtain Caltrans' initial feedback on that so that we can obtain those permits necessary. Within the memo, we outline what the process looks like with Caltrans in a six-step process that would take 2 to 3 years to work through and finish construction, so there's some time in advance. We believe that by continuing the process now, we set the stage for additional data collection that would allow us to do this ongoing temporary closure over the course of the summer. So if you remember, we did caution last year that we couldn't do temporary closures on an ongoing basis without a justification behind why we're doing them. having a project that we're pursuing and needing to collect data for that, especially given that we'll have some CEQA clearances that we'll need to obtain along the way, is very important. So that gives us a justification for continuing the temporary closures with the idea of having that long-term project. This is the next step in the process. So there are additional steps that we'd be looking for. We wanted to get this one going because working through the preliminary design and working with Caltrans is an intensive effort, and we have some good portion of the dollars already within the capital project that funds this program. So we're able to do it without a significant increase in funding. We will, if this is the goal, to create this Wood Road closure, we will need additional funding for the closure throughout the summer. Our estimate of that is $288,000. We would look to, and that would fund the closure throughout the summer, every weekend of the summer, as well as the important data collection that we do throughout the summer that continues to build the case for a future permanent installation. We would bring that forward as a mid-year proposal, and from a timing perspective, we think it's good in that it allows you to have the discussion of priorities through January 31st before this more significant investment comes to you, so you're able to weigh it with your other priorities that are before you. And of course, once we have that initial project done, we're still looking at a construction cost in the future. That's the $1 million number that's in your staff report. That is, again, is an estimate based on prior studies that were done for a traffic circle and roundabout at that particular location. And that request for funding would come later after the project is scoped in probably the fiscal year 18-19 timeframe. So it's out into the future and not necessarily something you have to make a decision on today or even through this fiscal budget cycle. Also to point out that there's been some expressed interest on doing other solutions for road closures on Santa Cruz, one of which we improved on the consent agenda today, which was a Santa Cruz Avenue closure from essentially the park to Highway 9. So a fairly big closure, has some traffic challenges, so we're interested to see what that looks like. There's continued opportunities to do an open streets concept, perhaps with the chamber, in coordination with the Chamber of Commerce in the downtown for some or all of Santa Cruz Avenue in the summer. So we'd be interested in hearing the council discussion on that if there is any, and certainly a discussion within the priority setting session through January 31st on where we should be investing our time there. Again, we expect that there'll be some learning experiences with this road closure. We do have traffic coming off of Highway 17 that we need to deal with, and that's not an easy thing to do. We also have the Wood Road residents that we need to provide access to. So there's a lot of mitigating factors, a lot of variables within the concept plan that we need to consider as we're working through this. Fiesta de Arts is the item you heard earlier. It's August 12th and 13th, so it's a little bit later in the summer. It may be nice to have some discussion about something maybe a little more casual earlier in the summer if that's something the council's interested in. So again, tonight we're looking for direction for the continuing closure of Santa Cruz Avenue at Wood Road, for the approval of the allocation of funds to make that happen. And we will be bringing forward the more significant cost appropriations later in the year if that's one of the priorities that the council is looking for. And with that, that concludes staff's report, and we're here for the discussion.
Thank you. I see Councilwoman Johnson and then Vice Mayor.
I have 3 questions, if I may.
Yes, please.
First question has to do with the desk item, on page 2 of 4. It is answering the question number 4 regarding smart signals on Highway 9. And the answer indicates that we have funding due to a grant that we received. Question was, will that be in place by Memorial Day of 2017? The answer was no. Part of it was we have funding for a portion of it. We do not have funding that we were thinking we would have for the second part due to the denial of the North 40 and the loss of those traffic fees. So how much money is still needed to complete that smart signal project?
So we have a project estimate on that smart signals project that signal upgrades townwide at $1.8 million. Our grant for ITS is $500,000, so there's a $1.3 million delta.
Okay. The second question is also about funding. On page 3 of our staff report, you have a 6-step process if the town wanted to continue the closure at Wood Road. So I am thinking, based upon the staff report, that items 1 and 2 are the $76,000 you're asking for tonight, correct?
That's correct.
And what are general cost estimates for items 3, 4, 5, and 6?
So the total project cost would, we're estimating at $1 million. That's the construction of the full construction of the project at Wood Road and South Santa Cruz Avenue. That information is based on a study that was done by the town several years ago that we escalated in cost to today's dollars and added a cushion on in case of unanticipated requirements from Caltrans. So it's a safe number, but it is a big number.
So there's a follow-up to my third question, then I have a fourth question. I'm raising my eyebrows because $1 million, given that there's environmental reviews, project scoping and design, and we've already been through the Almond Grove project scoping and design and know how much that costs. So $1 million strikes me as extraordinarily cheap.
Mm-hmm.
But are you confident with that $1 million figure?
It's a reasonable number for the project.
Okay. And my last question is, you talked about the need for data collection if we were going to continue to close the freeway. And I'm assuming that's because the state law doesn't allow us to close that road unless we are doing some kind of general plan or traffic study, and that's how we've justified it in the past. But with respect to festivals, et cetera, we do not need that data collection because that is specifically called out as something that we can close the road for under state law, correct?
Right, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Sachs. My question was similar and maybe not quite answered. So when I look in here, I add up the price at $900,000 rather than $1 million, but at this point, we're guessing anyway, probably. But then you're talking about needing almost $300,000 this year to continue it. So to me, that says, gee, a 3-year payback for the capital expense for keeping it close. If so, will the $288 we'd pay this year and maybe next year continuing that, would that drop to zero once we finish our capital project, or will there be ongoing expenses also?
Thank you. That's a great question. So the traffic circle that's envisioned is set to provide the opportunity to do an ongoing closure with permission of Caltrans. There will be ongoing costs for implementing those closures. We're not anywhere near far enough down the line on design to identify how we would implement that closure and what it would look like, but there will definitely be periodic charges to make that happen on a weekend by weekend basis throughout the summer months.
Can I follow up? A little bit different question. So I see in some of the questions that were asked of staff and answered, and some of the inputs from the public so far talks about a permanent closure. But when I read the staff report, I don't think I ever saw the word permanent. So are we talking about a permanent closure, meaning it'll be closed every day, every hour, or are we talking about a permanent ability to close it whenever we want?
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. It's a latter. It's being able to make the closure during the agreed upon times that we would have a permit for from Caltrans. At this point, I would envision that being weekends and holidays during the summer months, so the Memorial Day, Labor Day window.
One more. Is there any way we could, so you're saying we need a permit from Caltrans. Is there any way that we can get a permit that allows it to close it in emergency situations when there's a mudslide on 17, for example, and we see the problem coming?
As I highlighted in my verbal report, it's a little bit more difficult to do that. So if you envision that ramp fully engaged with traffic, bumper-to-bumper vehicles essentially stopped like what we experienced on Wednesday, and all of those vehicles within the downtown as well, all expecting to exit on that ramp, and we were to walk in and pick one of those vehicles and put a closure in front of it, I imagine that driver would be somewhat upset, as would the drivers behind them. So managing the traffic from that perspective on an emergency basis is extremely difficult and probably unrealistic in terms of being having that kind of a response and being able to handle that kind of a closure.
Just a follow-up, so I'm not sure exactly where the question is here, but in the past, the police chief has told us that he can close streets when there's a health and safety reason, which this seemed to be a health and safety reason. Wouldn't that allow us to do it? We just need to do it somehow, that maybe we close it at Route 9 and say, it's closed now, and then as soon as the traffic clears out, you open it at 9 and leave it closed down the way.
So I think you're looking at so the answer, I guess, functionally is yes, it is something that could happen. Reasonably, whether that's something that we would be able to manage in terms of staff resources is probably a different answer and maybe challenging. If there's a legality issue, the town attorney may want to chime in, and I can't see if the chief's moving towards the microphone or not, but there may be an opinion back there as well.
Certainly, you're correct. The police chief does have those powers to do that. I think what Director Morley was trying to say in that situation, when all of the vehicles are already in town trying to get on Highway 9, by closing that, trying to get on to the 17, by closing that, where do all those cars begin to go? And are you creating even more of traffic on University as they try to head up that way or turn around to go back around? Is it even, have you even created more of a problem than was already existing during that emergency situation? But I think that's something that we will talk to Caltrans about and see, what their thoughts are on that, because I think that's emergency planning. And how do we handle that situation? There's two situations, one we just don't even know about, but what if the situation is one we do know that's going to happen? Then there might be something you can do to stop them even from where those closures occur and begin. But just doing where the roundabout, I think Director Morley kind of hit it, where do we close it and when and how?
Thank you.
I have a quick question that I want to follow up on that. The $288,000, this is consulting costs that we would expend for the ongoing closure, but this would not include staff time, whether it's police force or PPW force, in assisting during this closure. Is that correct?
So the 288 is historic expenditure from the closure from PPW's perspective. All of that was consultant costs, so there was very little staff time involved with that. So it's consultant costs. The biggest single expense was the data collection. That's the most expensive, so collecting the data and then processing it afterwards, providing the report out. From an ongoing perspective, that's probably not an expense that we would have once the system's in place. That would go way down, as would some of the other more expensive costs. So we would be looking at probably in the $50,000 range or less from an ongoing summer cost.
Once Wood Road is complete, if it's built.
Correct.
Okay, so Councilmember Leonardis and then Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Mr. Morley, I know we have not yet voted on this, but I know sometime in the future the council may vote on repairing more streets in the Almond Grove, which would be scheduled to be repaired this summer. And I think it was Tate was one of the streets, and perhaps Missile was one of the other streets that are the next two to be considered. How would we be able to, assuming a council votes later, to use those repairs as a way to prevent traffic from going down those streets? Can we close off the streets completely except for resident traffic only for an extended period of time? And I'm assuming it will be occurring during the summertime.
So when we're doing the construction on Tate and Massal, we would expect that those streets would be closed to traffic for a significant amount of time. Limiting it to residents only is extremely difficult and probably not something we could manage in terms of identifying which vehicle driving through lives there or doesn't on some sort of productive basis. But we would be asking residents not to use those streets or to avoid using those streets where possible, much like we did for Broadway and Bachman. Obviously, those are long streets, and there's residents that are going to need to get in there, especially those that don't have the alley access. So we'll be accommodating them much like we did in the first phase of the project.
One more question. I recently had a conversation with a council member from a large city next to us somewhere, and they mentioned that at some point in time Caltrans was considering widening Highway 17 between Lark and Highway 9 at a cost of about $35 million. And I thought, okay, if we had whatever that stretch is, about 2.5 miles with another lane, could that not queue up about 2.5 miles more of cars? I realized that it would not solve the gridlock problem permanently in our community because there will still be a bottleneck that will be moved further up. However, there will be more bandwidth on the freeway to queue cars, so to speak. What is the status or the dream or the hope that that could maybe occur?
So we've had conversations over time on that particular stretch and that project. It was on the list put forward by VTA for Measure B. The council asked that that item come off of that list. I do believe it's in our general plan not to widen 17 through Los Gatos, so that would require some significant changes from the town's perspective if that's the direction we would want to go. In addition, as we were sort of working through the Measure B conversation, Caltrans did take a look at what that stretch, widening that stretch of road would do to alleviate traffic. And Caltrans' sort of early rough calculation was that the widening would need to go almost all the way to the summit before it actually had an impact in Los Gatos. So there is a much greater need than that stretch just between Lark and Highway 9.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson, did you still have a question?
I think so. I was going to go back to the 288,000. My question, I think you answered, which was going to be how much of the 288, how is it broken down? And you're telling me basically it's all consulting, correct?
Correct.
So we would be paying $300,000 to justify a closure through data collection, and we wouldn't have to pay anything if we just closed it for a festival or something.
Correct.
Okay, just making sure.
Okay. And I see more cards building up, and so I'm going to just ask one more question, and then I will open it up for public testimony. If you could, either Ms. Pravetti or Mr. Morley, just walk us through a decision could or could not be made today. We have priority setting on the 31st, and then a budget will eventually be developed based on those priorities. At some point, we utilize the funds available. Can you just kind of walk us through when we anticipate a realistic budget matching with the decisions that we will be making today and on the 31st?
So I'll start, and I would anticipate on the 31st that you would have a list of priorities and also sort of a budget of fund balance from last fiscal year, so you understand how we fund our capital projects and what the available funding might be from a one-time perspective going forward into the next fiscal year. So that would start to give you an idea of how your priorities and the costs associated with your priorities align with the available financial resources. And then through the annual budget process, we would bring that to you for your discussion. I would hope that out of the priority setting session, you would give us a ranking of some sort so that we'd have some information that we could work with towards creating a budget program that made sense, that aligned with your priorities, and we would work within the budget to put those projects into a list and bring them forward to you. And then as we work through the budget process in the spring and towards the June timeframe, you would create that full capital budget for the next year.
And let me just add that one of the items that you'll see is that there are a lot of capital needs in our community. And so one of the items that you'll be tasked with on the 31st is to give us a sense of the relative priorities of those capital needs. And it is a 5-year capital budget that we put together, so you'll have the ability to say maybe a project should go to an out year. But we are constrained in terms of the resources that are available to us. So this is really kind of if council's interested in continuing with the summer cut through traffic, this is the next step in that process. So that way we're actually making forward progress working with Caltrans. So we can't just do a temporary closure in absence without working with Caltrans.
Mr. Morley?
Yeah, if I can add, thank you. So I wanted to make sure that we emphasize that we tried to structure this so that the big expenditures come after your budget priority setting session, so that you're able to understand the entire realm of what we're prioritizing. So that's important. As to the costs associated with weekend closures of, say, Santa Cruz for a festival, we could anticipate there would be staff costs associated with that. If it was going to be an every weekend ongoing occurrence throughout the summer, somebody would actually have to facilitate the closure and manage the closure and the pickup, and then program also what was occurring for that festival, or what the reason behind that closure might be. So there could be some expenses associated with that. I think the town's benefited from employees that aren't necessarily hourly that have been out there during the summers in the past, so that has helped to alleviate some of the staffing costs. but putting out a closure on a regular basis would incur some cost.
And I would just add that with the Fiesta de Arts contract that you just approved, the organization that runs that event will pay for all staff costs associated with the closure. And so we would be happy to work with any entity, but since we do not have budget right now for anticipating the staff costs associated with the closure, we would want to negotiate that with any party that would be proposing events.
Okay, we'll now open public testimony. I'll just be going through the cards. Just a reminder, you have 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker tonight is Angelia Dorner.
Hello, Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove, and even a prouder resident of the town of Los Gatos. I want to thank you for your follow-up questions and comments related to my verbal communications. I was very concerned when I read in the staff report tonight the permitting process and the 2 to 3 year lag that would be required to get some of these things done with Caltrans. And so I think for you as well as all of the residents to have a much better understanding of how that all is going to work when all that work is going on would be really critical. Also, I think that we should not be necessarily paying for all the work on Highway 9. Isn't that the responsibility of the state? If it's a state road, including the traffic signals and other things. I don't know what the relationship is or what kind of contractual things there are with that, but it makes sense to me that they should be bearing the cost of all of it. Also, the issue with the cut-through traffic significantly affects West Downtown. You've seen this slide before. I'll probably continue to use it for a while. But people always say the Almond Grove. It's not just the Almond Grove. It's the thousands of homes that are west of the Almond Grove, all the way up to and including Ridgecrest. And that's the issue, is that people do come down Ridgecrest at times, and it just fills up every single artery throughout that entire area. The red dots that I'm showing there are the two out and in on Highway 9, as well as the 5 main intersections that are available to all of those residents on Santa Cruz. By closing Tate and Masal, my view is it means you're just forcing more traffic into the central queue of Santa Cruz, into that intersection, forcing us to actually have to use Santa Cruz intersections to get into town or get out of town. Also, I want to reemphasize the need for a signal light at Masal. The traffic impact analysis that was done for the McCarthy project says that based on professional judgment, that there's not enough turning volume to say that a light would really be needed. But from a residential judgment standpoint, I think that it's really critical that we do that. We need to be able to stop the continual flow from Highway 9 into town and allow that traffic to get out of the way. In addition, I just want to reemphasize that that these two projects are going in sync through the Planning Commission. High probability that the construction work will be going on in sync, and all the infrastructure work may be going on in sync. So the entire span from 9 to Masal or from Masal to Los Gatos Boulevard on Highway 9 is going to be significantly impacted. So maybe separate sessions to address that on an outreach basis would be really appreciated.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Dorner? Thank you, Ms. Dorner. Carrie DeChico? You know, when you come to the podium, if you could state your name. Sure. I think for this discussion item, it would also be helpful to know your address so that if you have relevant experience, having lived through it, it would be helpful as well.
Sure. Hello again. I'm Carrie DeChico. I live on Almendra Avenue. I've lived there for coming upon 20 years. I have very brief comments about the cut through traffic through the Almond Grove, usually through the July to September timeframe. Last year, it took me 40 minutes to get from Walgreens to my home 1 block away on Almendra due to gridlock. I was attempting to get home with medicine for my sick child. My husband, when trying to return home, was screamed at, honked at, threatened by cars waiting in line when he was trying to turn into our driveway. It took emergency responders 45 minutes to get to a child who had collided with a car due to cut-through beach traffic. The people cutting through our neighborhoods tossed cigarettes and other trash out of their cars, and we were left to clean it up. I have personally stopped a man from urinating in our yard because he had been stuck in traffic for so long. The traffic breaks and measures the town put in place last summer was a big help, and I thank you for doing this. We live in a town that has beach traffic. It's likely going to get worse on Highway 17, and that's okay. We knew that when we chose to make Los Gatos our home. We just ask that the town help keep ourselves and our children safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Lisa Mammal?
Hello, my name is Lisa Mammal, and I'm a 20-year resident of Tate Avenue. And I'm here to request that the Town Council do indeed implement the closure of the southbound Highway 17 ramp as an ongoing weekend solution and hopefully a permanent solution over the period of Memorial Day through Labor Day. Over the past 2 years or 2 summers, my family has experienced traffic on our street and in our neighborhood as never experienced before. The traffic caused by drivers apparently seeking the shortcut has at times made us prisoners of our own home and has led to unsafe conditions in the neighborhood. The traffic on Tate has at even times precluded us from returning home with our car. We've had to abandon it blocks away and have had to walk back to our home. Indeed, when my elderly mother was visiting last summer, I was compelled to park the car with my mother at a parking lot, walk home, fetch a wheelchair, and then go back to assist her with a wheelchair to get to our driveway and home. Unfortunately, sitting in a car with little progress on one's journey can make people misbehave, as evidenced by the trash and the food thrown out of the car and onto our street and onto our yards. It's not a simple issue of quality of life or the legal right to enjoy one's property. It pertains to safety. Last summer, a child pedestrian was hit on Tate by a traffic-snarled motorist. I sincerely worry about the safety of all of those in the area in the event of an emergency. Fire trucks, ambulances, emergency responders would not be able to access motorists, pedestrians, residents, or properties with its jammed bumper-to-bumper streets. What would happen if there were a fire on one of the clogged streets, fires of which are all too common in our town? I urge the council to seek input of the fire department on this decision. The traffic has also been affecting commerce in our neighborhood. One neighbor could not hold an open house viewings for the sale of his property during the summer weekends, as no one would or could get through the traffic to see the house. I note that the town did try last summer of setting up cones on Highway 9 so as to stem motorists from cutting through. Although it was well-intentioned, the cone solution didn't work. Motorists drove over them and did not heed the signage, as evidenced by 2 photographs that I did provide to the council. The bumper-to-bumper traffic on Tate, Massaul, and other local streets remained an issue. I would like to applaud the council and note that you did close the ramp to Highway 17 South near the Toll House Hotel, and it had a marked difference in the traffic through our neighborhood last summer. On those weekends, we no longer had to abandon our cars and walk home. We no longer had to calculate how long a simple errand would take given the traffic to and from our home. If there had been an emergency, a fire truck or an ambulance could have gotten to our neighborhood. There's been some mention of a few businesses claiming that the closure of the ramp to 17 might hurt commerce, as it might dissuade customers. I'd like to remind those businesses that we residents are your best customers, your very best customers. Stalled traffic does not allow for those outside of town to engage in commerce when they can't get out of their cars. I urge you to implement the closure of the South Highway 17 camp as an ongoing weekend solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Mammal. Chris Potter.
Yeah, my name's Chris Potter. I live at 33 Tate, which is the block closest to, as you know, West Main. And I think that our experience on that block in particular puts us really at ground zero for a lot of the worst effects the traffic cut through has shown the town. And the bottom line is that I think you can continue to collect data, scientific kind of data on cars and counting cars, but it will never capture the effects that it's having on the quality of life in the neighborhood and the safety in the neighborhood, as other people have said. As people stay in their car longer and longer and get down closer to West Main, they are very, very hot, irritable, and the music gets turned up. So if you want to take a pleasant walk down the street, you're going to be dealing with all kinds of different sounds and musics and things being thrown from the cars. We've seen that many times. So I would urge, fundamentally, my main point would be not to spend a lot of money, spend the minimum money you can to comply with the state's or the county's regulations on reporting the effects, because I think we already know the effects. Those of us who have sat there every morning and watched the cars build up, and we've done it for, say, 15 to 20 different weekends over the course of the last 2 years, and every time there's been a closure at Wood of the southbound on-ramp, we've seen very little traffic problems. Every time there is not, we have seen the traffic problems. And it will back up anywhere from our block of Tate all the way back to Highway 9, depending on how many people want to jump the traffic cones or how many police there are on the streets. One weekend we did notice that there was a police presence on the street, on Tate and on the other arteries that came off of North Santa Cruz. That did help, but it was very rare that we saw the policemen out there turning people away and regulating the cone obstruction or blockage on Highway 9. So I think that we have enough data just from looking at it and being there, watching it all the time. You'll never capture that just by counting cars. You have to stay there and watch it all day long. And I can tell you that the only way we've seen there's a significant reduction on our street is when the ramp at Wood is closed. Anything else has been just a Band-Aid and a recipe for a lot of unpleasant afternoons on Saturdays and on Sundays. Thanks.
Mr. Potter, you have a question, Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Sack. So you mentioned saving money, and I was thinking about this. We've had these discussions before last summer, before we are partway through when we'd done some of the pilot and then continued it. One of the questions that came up was whether we should only close the highway on Saturdays. I also live in the Almond Grove on Massaul, and my observations is Saturdays are bad, Sundays are not bad, except maybe on a long weekend. If we could probably cut the cost in half, maybe if we only did Saturdays and not Saturday and Sunday. I'll ask that question later. So my question for you is, did you observe the same thing? Can we just do Saturdays, or do we have to also do Sundays?
I think that it does get bad as you get closer to Main Street. It's worse on Saturdays. You're right. It backs up all the way out and down Highway 9 and on all the side streets. On Sundays, there is a little bit more relief. It may start a little bit later, but by 2, 3 in the afternoon, it can be just as backed up. And certainly our block is always backed up on Sunday.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, Julie Southern?
I'm Julie Southern. I've lived on Wood Road for just under 30 years, and I just wanted some clarification on 3 points. The first is there's a lot of terminology going around the closure of 17 at Wood Road versus the closure of Wood Road. And I just want to make sure that Wood Road's not being closed. The second is please make sure all Wood Road residents know about any discussions that are going on. I think that I was fortunate that I keep track of things online, but I don't think any Wood Road residents are here, and there's a lot of discussion about closing Wood Road. And the last is if the overall budget is $1 million for doing this concept of what you're doing on the closing of the ramp at Wood Road, that you actually take a look at Wood Road and maybe fix some of the retaining walls on Wood Road. We could use some, especially after the last rain, blocked culverts. I was out there in my wellies cleaning off all the things because many of the neighbors were not around. And if there's any committees that need a volunteer for this whole Wood Road effort, I'd be happy to do that. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Southern. We always jump at volunteers, so I'm sure someone's writing that down now. Carol Waite?
I'll make this quick. I spoke last summer when it was on the agenda for last summer, and at that time, I recommended that the on-ramp be closed because, I live on 19 Glenridge Avenue, which is between Hernandez and Pennsylvania. And last summer, on the weekends that the on-ramp was not closed, it was just gridlock all the way. Coming down Ridgecrest, they'd cut down Glenridge and all the other streets. But anyway, I do want to report that the closure did solve the problems. I also recommended at that point that it was just Saturdays only. And I think that I can say at the Glenridge area, the problem on Sundays is decreased. But who knows going into this next summer as the population increases and even more people want to go to the beach if that would be the case. But anyway, thank you for doing that. I do also want to say that when I speak to people I know who have businesses downtown, they are very much against the closure of that on-ramp. And I wonder if the town has reached out to them at all. I think they're all very important to us. And I think that if there's some way for local residents to make sure that we shop downtown on Saturday and Sunday to sort of make up for the fact that they're saying that people aren't coming into town because of the closure, I think that the town should probably figure out a way to maybe encourage that. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Catherine Summers?
Hi, I'm Catherine Summers, Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm here to speak on behalf of the downtown businesses that are affected by this cut-through traffic pilot programs and proposals. And I appreciate what you just said because that is part of what I want to talk about of getting people downtown. So last summer when this started going on, I had multiple business owners and chamber members coming in saying this is just not going to work, we're losing business, we're losing revenue, we're going to go out of business. We held a couple forums and we were there to listen to everyone's concerns and complaints and what have you. As the summer wore on though, I found it really interesting because more and more the business owners started to find favor with the closing of the streets. However, they said, is there anything that we can do to get the locals downtown and to encourage families to ride their bikes downtown, or if the road was presumably you can get onto the on-ramp, that they could in fact drive downtown, and there was not a lot of communication to let our locals know that they could do that. We in fact did a little test. We had a sidewalk sale on one of the weekends where the road was open, and put a lot of effort and worked with all of the local businesses to had an encroachment permit, so all the businesses were able to spill out onto the sidewalks with their racks and had just sales of everything. And interestingly, it was, I wouldn't say it was a fiasco, but we couldn't get anybody. I mean, the traffic was so awful that some of the merchants actually were coming out to the cars to try to sell to the people who were waiting in their cars, which didn't work too well. So it was a little bit disappointing, and what we found from that, and we'd love to try it again, is to have a sidewalk sale when the road is closed and really, again, communicate with the locals and say, you must come down and shop our downtown. One problem I did want to point out, though, is that even though we're solving the downtown problem with the traffic, perhaps with the Wood Road being closed, there is still the backup north of Highway 9, and I do think that there has to be some consideration given to that, because even though downtown streets seem so maneuverable, people still can't get from the northern parts of town into downtown as easily as they should. So I'd like to, I'd hope that maybe at the January 31st meeting we could look at some other options of ways to get some of our own residents down into town. I did meet a few weeks ago with the Kiwanis Club about their event, Fiesta de Arts, coming up. And because of that, before I didn't want to throw that onto the business community, so we did a small survey, which maybe many of you saw in our e-blast, and we got very positive responses about events downtown and closing the streets. I think people are really in favor of that. I think it will require a lot of promotion and a lot of really gathering the town together, but I think we're in favor of doing that, and I think the town people, business owners, are as well.
Okay. Your 3 minutes are up, but I do have questions for you. So, as you mentioned, the fiesta is not till August.
Right.
Just talking with your members, Do you think there is any momentum to trying to get something in June? I think it would be great to have some data in the beginning of the summer rather than waiting towards the end. I mean, it seems like you need that first one to take place, and then people realize this could be fun, successful, and then start participating.
Definitely agree. And in fact, I spoke with Matt Morley earlier today, and we were talking. We were discussing a few ideas of potential, not even festivals, but potential events that we could maybe do downtown. I don't know if you're familiar with the San Jose taking it to the streets, where they close the streets and they let the restaurants spill out for the weekend, with dining outside, and then you could have maybe children's activities going on in the streets or what have you. I think that is a possibility, and it doesn't require a huge commitment in staff per se. I definitely think that restaurants and the business owners would be very in favor of it. It still will require some logistical planning, particularly with DEH and the ABC, because to serve drinks outside, it's kind of a lot of other permitting processes that we have to go through, but I think it's a possibility. We were just looking, there's 15 weekends that you're proposing that we close, that Woods Road on-ramp. So that could potentially be 15 events, I think, to maybe save that $288,000. That is a lot of work for all these organizations in town, and is a huge risk of costs that might go into those events that won't, so I think there has to be, I'm just going to throw this out there, I think there has to be a little bit of partnering going on, maybe whether it's with the chamber in the town or with the Kiwanis or with the Lions. I mean, if some of these people come up with these great ideas, I think maybe the cost will have to be shared a little bit. If it's not in the actual production of the event, it might be in the promotion of the event to ensure that people get downtown.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Summers. Howard Labe?
Hi. I wasn't quite prepared for this, wasn't planning on speaking, but after hearing a little bit. First, Sundays, I'm at 109 Tate. Sundays are bad, not much different than Saturdays as far as Tate Avenue goes. As far as downtown merchants, I can't speak to any formality of a study, but I will tell you that most of my friends who don't live downtown won't come downtown when that ramp is open. So if you think people are coming through that ramp to shop, I would disagree with that. That traffic is caused by Waze, which is rerouting 17 traffic, and I don't see those people as intending on stopping in town and shopping. Maybe they eat because they can't get through the town. I can't address that. To me, from hearing you guys talk about budgets, I see it as a permanent solution would be to close that ramp permanently, and I know you don't have the authority to do that. You have to go through Caltrans. But it would make more sense to actually recapture that land, close the ramp permanently, and use the land as development potential so the town could capture that money back and use that money for other things and the land, whether it's parking, soccer fields, whatever you want to do with it, or more commercial development. I don't think weekends closures are enough. I think you're still going to have problems there, so that's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, so I have no speaker cards left, unless I see someone coming forward. So I will close the public testimony, and I look to council if there's further questions of staff and or comments you'd like to make to begin conversation. Councilwoman Jensen.
So I just want to throw something out there, and if I get any support for it, I can change it into a motion. It concerns me that thank you for all the input, everyone and staff, that we are considering what's essentially a budget item and a priority item 2 weeks before we have a priority setting session on a budget. So it strikes me that we shouldn't commit to spending $76,000 until we have all of the projects before us. And we've had a couple of speakers say, you need more information, we should figure this out. And I don't think we've done that. So I'm not sure that the council, knowing that in 2 weeks we're going to be talking about budget and priorities, should be committing to at least an expenditure of $76,000 and potentially an expenditure of $288,000, because the expectation will have been set without having that priority setting session. So it would be, my suggestion would be that we take all the good input that we've had and get that fed back to us at our priority setting session, so that we can look at it in the context of other things that we might want to accomplish and other alternatives that we haven't costed out. Because it's an incredibly, as I'm sure many of you have thought about, incredibly complicated question of what do you do with traffic? What's the solution? Because one solution impacts another person adversely, and we got to figure that out. And it's a question of keeping roadways passable and attractive. So if 17 is not attractive, you're going somewhere else. So how do you figure that out? But just for purposes of tonight, I would hope that this council would agree with me that we should put this over as part of our discussion for January 31st when we're setting priorities, rather than agree to spend money on it now.
Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question of staff. Knowing that we are going to have the priority setting session at the end of January, what was staff's concept of the suggestions that they have made in the staff report?
So we had looked at this as an opportunity of continuing the conversation and the momentum associated with the ongoing closure, and wanting to be positioned for this upcoming summer to be able to continue the program if that was the council's desire. We felt it was important enough and that the discussion would be lengthy enough and in-depth enough that having a separate agenda item conversation at this meeting, even in advance of the priority setting session, was valuable and would feed into it. I think having multiple conversations like this at the priority setting session just wouldn't be reasonable. We would take up the entire evening and in these big ticket items, big discussion items. But there's also the other elements that were coming forward tonight, and that we wanted to make sure that were included in the conversation, such as the opportunity to close Santa Cruz instead of the ramp closure, and make sure that that the feedback was out there and that we were getting the input from council. It had been a priority in past years. We had made some assumption that it would continue to be a priority, but certainly if the council wants to weigh it against the other items coming forward, that's a viable option. Would point out that once we get to a larger project, probably after when we get towards construction, that there are other funding opportunities. So as a congestion relief item, it may qualify for Measure B funding and provide funding outside of the town general fund. So there's other options out there, and of course we can highlight all of that if we bring this back at a future date.
Councilor Spector.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Morley. My question more specifically is there any prejudice to the town, its financing, its staffing, if a decision on this is delayed until January 31st?
We'll be fine with that. I think that in past years, this is the time of year where we've lost some momentum and the focus on this, so we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to keep that going. But if we need to delay this, we'll be fine from staff's perspective in terms of advancing the project.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one more question I was thinking of. Are you planning to have the cones on Tate and Massaul when it's closed? Last year we did that, and it, to me, seemed not needed and also causes its own problems.
I agree that it would be redundant and we would try it without.
Okay, so I'll just make a statement. So, in terms of delaying the decision, I don't feel the need to do that. I can imagine most of what's going to be in our priority setting session, and to me, this is high on the priority list, so I have no problem voting for it tonight.
Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Being that we received very much correspondence about Waze being a culprit, and we know Waze is a culprit, inviting all these wonderful people into our residential streets, can't we send Waze a bill for the $288,000 and say thank you for inviting all these folks to use our residential streets as a restroom?
of course, we can do that, and we wouldn't anticipate that they would send a check back. We do correspond with Waze on a regular basis and stay engaged with them. They are one of 3 major mapping programs, and we found that without addressing all 3 of them, so we're able to let Waze know that we have a closure. If we don't capture the Google Maps and the Apple Maps, we aren't successful. So there are at least 3 involved as being culprits that are offending the town.
Councilmember Leonardis?
I'll ask another ridiculous question. Can we use this money to develop some counterintelligence that makes their app not work in our community? All 3 of them.
We might have to talk to Vladimir Putin about that.
That's what I was thinking. Thank you.
Good one. Did you guys practice that?
Have to make light of a very difficult subject here.
Hey. Mr. Morley, a couple quick questions. So a speaker had mentioned fire department involvement. I'm assuming as we look at different routes, we are working with the fire department to ensure their comfort in whatever routing we choose on?
Yes, the fire, all public safety, I think, is important in the conversation, and we'll want to make sure that as we do street closures, they're well informed, especially with their University Avenue station, and a direct impact if we're directing more traffic to that route. It's also one of the major reasons why we need a permanent solution at Wood Road and South Santa Cruz, because there are specific requirements for turning radius that affect things like fire apparatus that we would facilitate through a permanent installation there.
And I do want to clarify, someone mentioned Wood Road closure. We are not closing Wood Road. Please confirm that.
That is confirmed, thank you.
Okay. And that further notification, as this evolves, will continue, including with the Wood Road residents. So a couple comments. I know the other council members have been sharing it. Understanding the priority session that is going to take place on the 31st, I do see the large amount, the 288, as something that has to be weighed with the other priorities. But I don't want to lose momentum, because there are things that we can do now that do not require further budget, such as if we agree that utilizing community events, whether it's 15 or some amount, I think the earlier we start, the better. And if there's agreement now that that's something we want to pursue, an extra 2 weeks is something that I think would be quite helpful. There are things I've said in the past, moving the farmers market on Sundays, that would help alleviate more community events for sure. One of the things that was raised that I thought was interesting, whatever we do with Wood Road, that is not something that we could then use to develop on, is it? The Wood Road, as you're envisioning it, as staff is envisioning it, is just to create an infrastructure for better enforcement of traffic, but it's not to actually create a barrier that we could then build something on.
Yeah, I think if you're going to where the speaker was mentioning a permanent closure of Wood Road, so get rid of that on and off ramp at Wood Road. That property is Caltrans property and would be their property. So they would, typical Caltrans process is to sell that property, identified as surplus property, much like the town would do for property, and then to sell that at market rate.
I see. Okay. And so, so I'm looking to the council, a couple of thoughts. I know there was some discussion about holding off on at least the budgetary items, but is there, I'm looking just initially, is there at least some consensus on looking at directing staff to look at community events so that we can at least begin that process? Councilmember Jensen.
So at least from this council person, yes, closing for events, I think makes sense. It's more cost effective. It's more fun to bring residents downtown. It makes use of our streets. Besides data collection, it complies with the state law, which I think is very important. So yes, and the reason that I still would say delay a greater decision is because we are being asked to commit, 76, I'm terrible at math, but 300,000 plus 76, almost $400,000 for a continuing closure, and I don't think that we can do that in a vacuum without looking at our other priorities. But do I think it's a good idea to have a nice event downtown and close the street? Sure.
Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you. I think those of you out there in our audience and on a television audience know that this is not an easy issue to address. It is not what I call a linear analysis. If we do nothing, we pretty much know what the result will be because we saw it last summer and we saw it, I think, July 3rd of 2015. It gets gridlocked throughout the town. If we close 17, it relieves the gridlock in downtown, but it doesn't necessarily, but it creates problems in north of Highway 9. And it creates issues for some individuals who don't like, who live in the Santa Cruz Mountains, who don't like having to go back to Highway 9 to get onto 17. So there have been issues raised on that. Having said that, we did have a traffic study, which was part of our staff report, and they did conclude that when there was no closure on at Wood Road, that downtown was gridlocked and that visitors were not coming to downtown. And somebody here actually mentioned a fact that happened on my own street last year, which is they had to stop the open houses for sale of open houses on the weekend because nobody could get there. So it does have a negative impact. Closing Santa Cruz downtown, like the Fiesta Days Arts, that's a positive, a happy, a festival, and we're going to get it at least once. We may get it more times. Have to see what the Chamber of Commerce and everybody else can come up with. But the challenge you have there is, does that stop the gridlock in downtown? And it may not. It may just stop the cars from coming on to Santa Cruz Avenue, but they will then fan onto the neighborhoods and the other commercial streets. So it might be a positive thing. I would certainly go because I can walk there. I walked to the one last year that was tried when there was no closure, and it was very depressing. So I think I agree actually with Mr. Rennie. I think that this is a priority. That, excuse me, that going forward with the steps that staff has recommended is a good thing to do. It doesn't bar having festivals, and so we should just take the first steps. But again, I want to listen to what everybody else has to say.
Vice Mayor?
I guess just briefly, I am in favor of trying more festivals. I wonder what the effects will be if the on-ramp at Wood Road are closed or is open, but we close the rest of the street. I assume we're not going to close the Broadway entrance, so his car's going to sneak all the way around down Broadway. Or, you know, what's going to happen? So I'd like to see something early in the summer because we've learned when we implement something, it doesn't go as we plan. So I don't want one project to then determine it doesn't work. I'd like to have a couple projects where we can modify the way we implement it. So I would definitely like to see something tried earlier on and then, then another one so we have an opportunity to improve upon it.
Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you. Well, excuse me. Following up on the Vice Mayor, to staff, the Santa Cruz Avenue festivals, I am assuming that you are anticipating those when the ramp is not closed. That, in other words, that people can still get onto 17.
Yeah, so we've struggled with that. We've struggled with how do you plug all of the holes and as you move further away from Wood Road, that becomes increasingly more difficult. I think the Broadway example is a good one. There's a sneaky little way around that most people wouldn't know, but I can tell you Waze knows about it, and they'll get the cars there. So how do we handle that? If we're not closing South Santa Cruz by the park, how do we handle vehicles coming down University and wanting to get on the freeway there? So there's some logistics to work through in order to make that happen and to identify exactly what needs to be closed to actually be successful.
But wouldn't you see all of the cars that are attempting to enter 17 going south that want to use the entryway at Santa Cruz Avenue? They will still come into, Waze will still send them into our town and get them onto the freeway through our town. They just won't be able to use Santa Cruz Avenue.
Yeah, if there's a way, the Waze will get them there, and it'll just be a tight funnel to work their way through it. And it will even out a little bit so that the bumper-to-bumper traffic on 17 is about equal in delay to that of whatever shortcut is coming through town. But it will be there unless we solve for that, I anticipate, and that's sort of the what we're looking towards for the summer if we're doing some of these closures. I think the closure for Fiesta de Arts is a unique one. It takes closes from Broadway all the way to Highway 9, so it's a more extensive closure, a much bigger closure, and it directs traffic off of 17 in a reverse direction on Montebello. So if you imagine driving backwards past the post office, that's what it does. So that's not a one-way out, and I think with a little ingenuity, we can handle the cut-through traffic on Broadway, but it still becomes not even an easy solution there. So there's some work to do on a closure on the downtown. I too like that idea. I like the idea of having an open streets concept in the downtown. I think it's a neat way to solve two problems. We bring people downtown. And we address some of the traffic issues. We just have to make sure that we are ready for some of the unanticipated consequences that we experience.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. If I just follow up on that, so you didn't exactly say it but by talking, you've pretty much said yes. When we're going to leave the entrance open when we have some event going on, and I would assume, and tell me if I'm correct. If we were to close that, in addition to having an event, now we have to go to the data collection and it costs us money. We only save money by having an event if we also leave at the Caltrans property open. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think the question for the council on the Wood Road project is that ultimately your long-term goal, to have an opportunity to close that on a regular cycle? And have something in place there. If that's the ultimate goal, then I think the answer is we need to continue to move forward. If you're comfortable that there's going to be an alternate solution, such as an event in downtown on 15 weekends every summer, if that's something that we can handle some way somehow, then that may be an alternate solution.
So I appreciate, Mr. Morley, the way you just phrased that right there, because at least for me, I'm looking at this as a long-term solution. And so implementation and the steps necessary to provide some type of closure at Wood Road is what I'm envisioning towards. The issue for me and for the 31st is, if this is the route to move forward, we know these are the budgetary costs, what does not get paid next? And I think that's an important conversation, because as we talk with our residents who are providing feedback, it's a two-way dialogue of there has to be an understanding, if this is the route we're going towards, $1 million will not be spent on something else. And I think if any of you are planning to attend the meeting on the 31st, that's another element of feedback that I think that would be helpful. But as of tonight, that's where I'm leaning. And so the next step for me on the 31st is looking at what does not get funded. Mayor.
I'll just quickly add to it, and I'm also thinking we should move towards the closure as a long-term solution. And as you're trying other things along the way, if we come up with a better solution, we can stop that progress. But I'm willing to spend money towards that progress, which I think is the $75,000 or whatever it is on here. I want to keep us moving, because it's a long process. It's going to take 2-3 years to get there. I don't want to do anything to slow that down, so that if in 2 years we want to be there, we are there.
Madam
Councilwoman,
Mayor.
I'm sorry. Can Ms. Pravetti weigh in first?
Certainly.
I just wanted to clarify that the action tonight is to move approximately $10,000 from the Traffic Impact Mitigation Fund to an existing cut-through traffic project that already has funding. So the incremental cost of, if you choose to do an action this evening, is really $10,000 because we have an existing cut-through traffic capital improvement project. We understand the council's concern about, well, doesn't this obligate us then for another $300,000 in our operating budget for data collection? But at this point, we're just seeing, do we even want to start the initial Caltrans? So it's the increment is really $10,000 for tonight.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilwoman Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We may have forgotten what he said, but what Mr. Rennie said before Ms. Pravetti spoke, I totally agree with.
Okay, well then, would someone like to venture into a motion? Councilwoman Spector?
Based on what Ms. Pravetti just said, I need to get clarification on what the motion is. I'm looking at your staff report. Your staff report has 3 recommendations. Are you saying that we're only doing number 2?
You would, well, again, it's entirely up to the council, but we are proposing 3 steps. One is providing direction, and you've done a great job providing us direction to continue to explore events with potential partners, and we'll cost that out and bring that back to you for priority setting, so you'll have that. If you wish to move forward this evening on the proposal to pursue the next steps with the Caltrans process and start plans and specs, then we would recommend a budget adjustment of $10,000 from our Traffic Impact Fund to augment our existing capital improvement program for cut-through traffic. And then third, with that money totaling $66,000, we would then be able to enter into a contract for engineering services, so that way we can at least start the Caltrans process. Again, I think to the points that other council members have made, if you feel that you want to weigh and balance this with other operating and capital projects that we'll be bringing forward as part of the package on the 31st, that's certainly within your purview, but you did get some good public comments, so you have a little bit more robust understanding of what the issue is as we do move into priority setting.
Okay.
I think you answered my question, but I'm not positive. So I'm going to go back to, I'm comfortable moving to approve items 1 and 2. I'm not sure about 3 until we do the priority setting. And so that's what my question of staff is. Can you separate them, or do you need the whole package?
So if I may, item 1, you can do. That one's easy, and you've probably done it at this point, so check that one. The reason we need item 2 is to make item 3 happen. So if they sort of go together, if you're not going to do 3, then it's not really necessary to do item 2.
And how much of item 3 do you anticipate implementing between now and January 31st?
0.
Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and complete my motion for the recommendation items 1, 2, and 3 on our staff report. I'll just stop there.
Any comments, any motion? I need a second. Councilmember Johnson.
That wasn't a second, that was going to be a question.
Okay, a question.
For staff. Item 2, 9,908, is going to get combined with item 3, $66,000, to create a contract for consulting, correct? Is that right?
Almost. So the 9,908 is going to get added to our current fund balance for a total amount of $66,000, and that 66 will be the contract amount.
For the purpose, so items 2 and 3 are the council agreeing to an ongoing contract for data collection to justify a potential, okay, tell me exactly what it's for then.
So item 2 and 3 is a combination to begin the conceptual design and the permitting process with Caltrans. So the first part of a capital project is the concept design, where we put it together, put it down on paper, and start to have the conversation with Caltrans to outline what the project will begin to look like.
Okay. So this council would be voting, if we approve this motion, if it gets a second, to fund a capital improvement project of $76,000 without looking at other capital improvement projects?
Of $66,000.
60, okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
And actually, Mr. Morley, you just said something that there is still a chance that Caltrans may not even approve this.
That's correct.
Okay, so this is just to even begin the process with Caltrans.
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Vice Mayor.
I'll go ahead and second it because, as I said before, I'd like to get the process started. I know it's only 2 weeks away till priority setting, but we're not going to vote on this in priority setting, so then we'll have to wait again for it to come before approval. So I don't think it's an outrageous amount to continue down the line, so I'll second the motion.
Okay. Councilmember Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Mr. Morley, is there any grant funding available for such projects? And have we pursued applying for any grant monies?
We anticipate that their opportunities would come with the project. A lot of times with the project, they want something that is called shovel-ready, so ready to be built. And that involves either the conceptual design or the design through the environmental process, so that the granting authority knows that it's ready to be built and that you're serious about it. So that's where one of the advantages is to taking the next step, is it moves us incrementally towards that process. In February, when we discuss Measure B projects, we'll talk a little bit about some of the positioning and the urgency behind wanting to be in front of that. So that would be one of the granting opportunities, would be Measure B funds. In our mind, it's in the highway section, which allows for congestion relief in and around Los Gatos, and that's that widening Highway 17 project that came off the list, and those dollars were sort of not quite earmarked, but identified as a potential funding source for Los Gatos congestion relief projects.
Councilmember Leonardis?
One more follow-up. So to reiterate, in order to get closer to shovel-ready, this would have to be voted yes by a majority of the council this evening in order to even explore applying for a grant. Is that correct?
We have to get there eventually if you want a project in the long run. I think to Councilmember Spector's question on how much we would have done by the 31st, realistically, we'll be trying to establish a contract with our consultant on January 31st, so we won't have a contract in place, or if we do, it'll be barely in place. We can make sure that if it helps the council, we can make sure that we wait on that. But it would be nice to have the authority to enter into that contract should this continue to be a priority for the council out of the priority setting session on the 31st, so that we're not required to come back for approval at a later date.
And the question I have with this 9,908, right now, where would we be moving the money from?
So we have, within our capital program, we have a traffic, a cut-through traffic project that has a balance of funds from last year that were unexpended. We would add the $9,908 to that. The $9,908 also comes from traffic impact fees. Okay. So all of the funds for this particular project have come from traffic impact fees.
Got it. Okay. Any further questions? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No, and I'm voting no because I don't think that we have all of the possible capital improvement projects before us, and that we need to consider all alternatives. And I think that it's a little premature to do this without having considered all those alternatives and all other projects that may not go forward by doing this tonight. And I haven't heard anything that indicates there's any adverse consequence to delaying for 2 weeks till the 31st till we have that information, because we could go forward if it was appropriate at that time as well.
Councilmember Leonardis?
I'm also voting no for the reasons stated by Ms. Jensen.
Okay, so let the record reflect that it was 3-2 with Councilmember Jensen and Leonardis in dissent. Okay. Okay, so that concludes our public hearing for the evening. We look forward to your participation on January 31st. I think we've mentioned it quite a bit, and I hope that many of you will be here. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.